The instructor issued a warning. She smiled and said, "Face my beast first." Part 1. The ship carrying new cadets landed on the metal platform with a heavy thud. Yuna looked through the small window and saw the Unified Species Combat Academy for the first time. It was massive. The building stretched toward the purple sky like giant fingers made of steel and glass. Thousands of windows reflected the light from the 3 suns that hung in the sky of this planet. She had traveled for 6 months to reach this place. 6 months in a cold ship, eating terrible food, sleeping in a room smaller than a closet. But she was finally here, the most famous military academy in the entire galaxy. "You ready?" asked Taiwu, standing beside her. He was her oldest friend. They had grown up together on the same colony ship after Earth joined the Galactic Consortium. He was tall for a human, with broad shoulders and kind eyes. He always worried about her, even when she told him not to. "I'm always ready," Yuna replied. Her voice was soft and calm. She touched the old pendant hanging around her neck. The habit she had developed years ago. The door of the ship opened and bright light flooded inside. Yuna stepped out with the other recruits. There were 60 of them in total. Most were aliens from different species across the galaxy. She saw the Sketh first. They were reptilian creatures, 8 feet tall, covered in thick scales that looked like armor. Their eyes were yellow and cold. Behind them stood the Volari, tall and thin beings with 4 arms and skin that changed color with their mood. There were also the Krath, massive creatures that looked like bears made of stone. And then there were the 2 humans, Yuna and Taiwu. They were the smallest beings in the group, the shortest, the softest. The aliens looked at them with expressions that ranged from curiosity to disgust. Yuna felt their stares, but did not react. She simply walked forward with her bag over her shoulder, her face showing nothing. A loud horn sound made everyone stop. From the main building, a figure emerged. He was the largest Sketh Yuna had ever seen. His scales were dark green, almost black, and scars covered his arms and face. He wore the uniform of an instructor, decorated with medals and symbols of rank. His name was Vrel, and his reputation was known across the galaxy. He had killed more enemies in battle than most soldiers saw in 10 lifetimes. Instructor. Vrel walked slowly toward the group of cadets. His yellow eyes moved from face to face, studying each one. When his gaze landed on the 2 humans, he stopped walking. The silence was heavy. "Humans," Vrel said. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "I was told they were sending humans this year." I did not believe it. He walked closer to Yuna and Taiwu. He towered over them. Yuna's head barely reached his chest. "Look at them," Vrel said to the other cadets. "Soft skin, weak bones, no claws, no natural armor, no venom." He laughed, and it was not a kind sound. On their own planet, they were prey. They survived by hiding in caves while predators hunted them. They made tools because their bodies were too weak to fight. Some of the alien cadets laughed. A young Sketh named Goran made a sound of disgust and spat on the ground near Taiwu's feet. Taiwu's hands became fists. His jaw tightened. He wanted to say something, to defend himself and his species. But before he could speak, Yuna touched his arm gently. He looked at her. She shook her head slowly, telling him to stay calm. Vrel noticed this exchange. His eyes narrowed with interest. "The female controls the male," he observed. "How strange." Among the Sketh, such weakness would never be tolerated. Yuna looked up at Vrel. Her expression did not change. She did not seem angry or scared or embarrassed. She simply watched him with dark, calm eyes. "Nothing to say, little human?" Vrel asked. "No, Instructor," Yuna replied. Her voice was polite and empty of emotion. Vrel stared at her for a long moment. Something about her stillness seemed to bother him, though he did not show it clearly. Finally, he turned away and addressed all the cadets. You are here because your species believe you are warriors. You are here to prove them right or prove them wrong. In 1 week, each of you will face a combat evaluation. You will fight. You will be tested. Those who fail will be sent home in shame. Those who cannot handle the training will be removed. He paused and looked at the humans again. Some of you do not belong here. The weak will be exposed. The prey will be recognized. This academy has no room for creatures who cannot fight. The other cadets stood tall and proud. The humans remained silent. That night, Yuna sat alone on the observation deck of the dormitory building. Through the large windows, she could see stars stretching across the darkness of space. Millions of them. Billions. Each one a sun. Each possibly with planets. Each possibly with life. She held her pendant in her hand. It was small and metal, with symbols carved into its surface. Symbols that no one at this academy would recognize. Taiwu found her there an hour later. You should sleep, he said, sitting down beside her. I will, she replied. Soon. That instructor hates us. He hates what he thinks we are. Taiwu looked at her. And what are we? Yuna did not answer immediately. She continued looking at the stars. Her thumb moved across the surface of her pendant, feeling the old familiar grooves of the carved symbols. We are what we survived, she finally said. Taiwu did not fully understand her words. He knew Yuna had secrets. He knew she had been somewhere before they met again on the colony ship 3 years ago. He knew she sometimes woke up screaming from nightmares she refused to discuss. He knew about the scar on her arm, the one she always kept covered, but he did not ask. He had learned long ago that Yuna would share when she was ready. Until then, he would simply be her friend. We'll prove them wrong, Taiwu said. We'll show them what humans can do. Yuna smiled, but it was a strange smile. Sad and knowing and ancient. Yes, she said quietly. We will. Somewhere deep inside her, in a place that existed between her cells, something stirred in its sleep. Something that had been resting for a long time. Something that remembered blood and fire and the screams of monsters dying in the dark. Yuna pressed her hand against her arm, against the scar hidden beneath her sleeve. Not yet, she whispered, so softly that Taiwu could not hear. But soon. The stars continued to shine, cold and distant, watching the small human female with no idea what she carried within her. The instructor issued a warning. She smiled and said, Face my beast first. Part 2. 3 days passed at the academy. 3 days of training, exercises, and tests. Yuna completed every task given to her. She was not the fastest. She was not the strongest. She was simply competent. Enough to not fail, not enough to stand out. The other cadets ignored her. To them, she was not worth noticing. Just a small human female who would probably fail the evaluation and go home crying. They had more important things to focus on. Taiwu tried harder. He pushed himself in every exercise. He ran until his legs burned. He lifted weights until his arms shook. He wanted to prove that humans deserved to be here. He wanted to earn respect, but respect was not given easily at the Unified Species Combat Academy. On the third night, Instructor Vrel announced a practice sparring session. Cadets would fight each other to test their combat skills. The matches were supposed to be controlled, safe. When one fighter clearly won, the match would be stopped. Taiwu was paired against Goran. The young Sketh was almost as large as Instructor Vrel. His scales were bright green, and his teeth were sharp like knives. When he saw that his opponent was a human, his yellow eyes lit up with cruel pleasure. Finally, Goran said, I get to show everyone what happens when prey tries to act like a predator. Taiwo stood in the fighting circle. He raised his fists and prepared himself. He knew he was smaller. He knew he was weaker. But he also knew that humans had survived for thousands of years against creatures bigger and stronger than them. Begin. Instructor Vrel said. Gorn attacked immediately. He was fast, much faster than Taiwo expected. His clawed hand swung toward Taiwo's face. Taiwo ducked and rolled to the side, barely avoiding the strike. He tried to counter. He threw a punch at Gorn's ribs. His fist connected, but it felt like hitting a wall of stone. The scales absorbed the impact. Gorn did not even seem to notice. The Skef laughed and attacked again. This time, his claws caught Taiwo's shoulder, tearing through his uniform and into his skin. Blood flowed. Taiwo stumbled backward, pain shooting through his arm. Too easy, Gorn said. Is this really the best your species can offer? Taiwo gritted his teeth and charged forward. He aimed low, trying to tackle Gorn's legs. If he could bring the Sketh to the ground, maybe he could find a weakness. But Gorn was ready. He grabbed Taiwo by the throat and lifted him off the ground. Taiwo's feet kicked in the air. He could not breathe. His vision started to darken. Pathetic, Gorn whispered. Then he threw Taiwo across the ring. Taiwo hit the ground hard. He heard something crack in his chest, ribs, at least two of them. The pain was so intense that he could not move. He could only lie there, gasping for air that would not come properly. The match should have been stopped. Taiwo was clearly defeated. But Gorn walked toward him with slow steps, his claws extended. Instructor, one of the Volari cadets said nervously. The match is over. The human lost. Did I say it was over? Vrel replied. His voice was cold and calm. He stood with his arms crossed, watching. Gorn reached Taiwo and kicked him in the stomach. Taiwo cried out in pain. Another kick followed, this time to his back. Then another. The beating continued for almost a minute before Vrel finally raised his hand. Enough, the instructor said. Take the human to the medical bay. Perhaps this will teach his species to know their place. Two medical robots lifted Taiwo's broken body and carried him away. Gorn cleaned his claws and smiled at the other cadets. Who wants to be next? He asked. No one answered. Yuna had watched everything from the edge of the training room. Her face showed nothing. No anger. No fear. No sadness. But inside her, something was waking. Something was remembering what it felt like to hurt. Something was starting to get angry. She visited Taiwo in the medical bay that night. He was lying on a bed, his chest wrapped in bandages, his face swollen and bruised. The medical machines had healed the worst damage, but he would need days to fully recover. Hey, he said weakly when he saw her. Yuna sat down beside his bed. She looked at his injuries without speaking. I tried, Taiwo said. I really tried. But he was too strong. Too fast. I could not do anything. I know, Yuna said softly. You should report this. He went too far. The instructor let him go too far. Yuna was quiet for a moment. Then she shook her head. Reporting will not change anything, she said. In places like this, power decides what is right and wrong. The Sketh have power. We do not. Any report will be ignored or turned against us. Taiwo closed his eyes. Tears of frustration leaked from the corners. Then what can we do? Just accept it? Let them treat us like animals? Yuna reached out and touched his hand gently. No, she said. We do not accept it. We change it. How? She did not answer. Instead, she stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the three suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of red and orange. When I was young, Yuna said quietly, I learned that there are two ways to earn respect. The first is to ask for it, to explain why you deserve it, to hope that others will listen and understand. She turned to look at Taiwu. The second way is to show them, to demonstrate your worth in a way that cannot be denied or ignored, to make them see you differently, whether they want to or not. What are you planning? Taiwu asked. Yuna smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who had made a decision. A dangerous decision. Rest now, she said. Tomorrow will be an interesting day. She left the medical bay without another word. Taiwu wanted to call after her, to ask what she meant. But his body was too tired, and his voice was too weak. He fell asleep worried about his friend. The next morning, all the cadets gathered in the main training hall for their daily exercises. Instructor Vrel stood at the front, as always, his yellow eyes scanning the room. The doors opened and Yuna walked in. She walked past the other cadets without looking at them. She walked past Goran, who sneered at her. She walked all the way to the front of the room and stopped directly in front of Instructor Vrel. I want to take my combat evaluation now, she said. Her voice was clear and loud enough for everyone to hear. Against Goran, the room went completely silent. Every alien turned to look at the small human female who had just signed her own death sentence. Goran laughed first. Then others joined him. The sound filled the training hall like thunder, but Instructor Vrel did not laugh. He looked down at Yuna with something like curiosity in his cold eyes. "Bold words for prey," he said. "Do you understand what you are asking?" "I understand," Yuna replied. "Goran nearly killed your friend yesterday. He will not be gentle with you. I am not asking for gentle." Vrel studied her for a long moment. Then a cruel smile spread across his scarred face. "Very well. But understand this, I will not stop the match when you are bleeding on the floor." Yuna nodded. "I am not asking you to stop anything. But I have a condition." Whispers spread through the crowd. "A condition?" This tiny human was making demands. "You are in no position to bargain," Vrel said. "If I win against Goran," Yuna continued, ignoring his words, "you fight me next." The whispers became gasps. The laughter became stunned silence. A human challenging Instructor Vrel? The greatest warrior the Sketh had ever produced? It was madness. It was suicide. But Vrel's smile only grew wider. "Agreed," he said. "And when you lose because you will lose, you leave this academy in disgrace. You admit that humans do not belong among warriors. Deal?" Yuna looked up at the massive reptilian instructor. She was so small compared to him. So fragile. So soft, but her eyes held no fear. "Deal," she said. The instructor issued a warning. She smiled and said, "Face my beast first." Part 3. Word spread through the academy like fire through dry grass. By the time the combat arena opened, nearly every cadet and instructor in the building had gathered to watch. The stands were filled with aliens of every species, all staring down at the fighting ring below. They had come to see a human die. Taiwu had dragged himself from the medical bay against the advice of the medical robots. He sat in the front row, his ribs still aching, his heart filled with fear for his friend. He had tried to stop her. He had begged her to cancel the match. But Yuna had simply smiled and told him to watch. "You do not understand," he had said. "Goran will kill you, and then Vrel will make sure nothing remains." "Trust me," she had replied. Those were her only words. Now he sat among hundreds of aliens who were betting on how quickly the human female would fall. The odds were not in her favor. Some said she would last 10 seconds. Others said 5. A few generous souls gave her 15. The arena door opened and Goran walked in. He raised his clawed hands above his head and roared. The crowd cheered. He was a favorite among the Sketh cadets, known for his brutality and his love of violence. His scales shone under the bright lights, and his yellow eyes burned with excitement. "Where is my prey?" he shouted. "Where is the little human who wants to die?" The opposite door opened. Yuna walked into the arena wearing standard combat gear. Nothing special. No weapons. No armor. Just a simple uniform given to all cadets. Her dark hair was tied back, and her pendant was tucked beneath her shirt. She looked small. So very small. Like a child walking into a cage full of wolves. The crowd made sounds of disappointment. They had expected something more. Some kind of human trick or technology. But this female looked like exactly what she was, a soft, weak creature about to be destroyed. "Last chance to withdraw, little prey," Garin called across the arena. "I promise to make it quick if you beg." Yuna stopped in the center of the ring. She looked at Garin with the same calm expression she always wore. The same empty, peaceful face that showed nothing. "I have fought things far worse than you," she said. Her voice was soft but somehow carried to every corner of the arena. Garin laughed. "Worse than me? What could a human possibly have fought that was worse than a Sketh warrior?" Yuna did not answer. She simply raised her hands and took a fighting stance. Instructor Vrel stood in his observation post above the arena. He raised his hand. "Begin," he commanded. Garin charged. He was fast. Faster than he had been against Taiwu. He wanted to end this quickly and impressively. His claws cut through the air toward Yuna's throat. But Yuna was not their dot. She moved like water. Like smoke. Like something that existed between moments. One instant she was in front of Garin. The next she was beside him, then behind him. His claws found only empty air. Garin spun, confused. He attacked again. And again. And again. Each strike missed. Each swipe hit nothing. The crowd grew quiet. Something was wrong. This was not how prey behaved. Yuna moved around Garin like he was standing still. She studied him as she dodged, his patterns, his weaknesses, the gaps in his defenses that his scales could not protect. She had spent 3 days watching him. 3 days learning how he moved. 3 days preparing. What is happening? Someone in the crowd whispered. "Stay still." Garin roared in frustration. He swung wildly, desperately trying to hit the small creature that kept slipping through his claws. Then Yuna stopped moving. She stood directly in front of him, perfectly still. Garin saw his chance and thrust his claws forward with all his strength. Yuna stepped to the side at the last possible moment. As Garin's arm passed her, she grabbed his wrist and twisted. The movement was small but precise. Garin's body followed, unable to resist the leverage. He flipped through the air and crashed onto his back. Before he could rise, Yuna was on top of him. Her knee pressed against his throat. Her hand grabbed one of his own claws and pressed the sharp tip against his eye. The arena was silent. Completely silent. No one breathed. No one moved. 30 seconds. The entire fight had lasted 30 seconds. Yuna leaned close to Garin's face. Her voice was soft, meant only for him. "I could push your claw into your brain right now," she said. "I could end you before anyone could stop me. Do you understand?" Garin tried to speak, but her knee pressed harder against his throat. He could only make a choking sound. "When you fought my friend, you did not show mercy. You did not stop when you should have. Remember that. Remember that I showed you something you did not show him." She released him and stood up. Garin scrambled away, his yellow eyes wide with something he had never felt before. Fear. True fear of a creature smaller and weaker than himself. The silence continued. Then, Instructor Vrel rose from his observation post. His scales had paled slightly. His expression was no longer amused. "What are you?" he demanded. Yuna reached under her shirt and pulled out her pendant. She held it for a moment, looking at the symbols carved into its surface. Then she let it fall to the ground. It hit the arena floor with a heavy sound, too heavy for its small size. "Before I came to this academy," she said, "I was a beast handler." The words meant nothing to the aliens watching. They exchanged confused looks. Beast handler? What was that? But in the front row, Taiwu suddenly understood. His face went pale. His hands started to shake. He knew. He finally knew what Yuna had been hiding all these years. "On Earth," Yuna continued, "before we joined the Galactic Consortium, something attacked us. Creatures came from the dark space between stars. Monsters that could not be killed by normal weapons. They tore through our cities. They destroyed our armies. They nearly ended our species." She paused, and her eyes grew distant, remembering. "So we made our own monsters to fight them." Instructor Vrel stepped forward. "Explain yourself, human." Yuna touched the scar on her forearm. The scar she always kept hidden. The scar that Taiwu had wondered about for years. "The bomb program," she said. "Our scientists found a way to join humans with specially created creatures. Bioengineered guardians. Symbiotic partners that share everything with their host: pain, memory, strength, life force. We called them beasts. And those of us who bonded with them became beast handlers." She looked up at Vrel. "My partner and I survived the Pacific breach together. 3 years of fighting in hell. We killed hundreds of those creatures side by side. She has been sleeping inside me since the war ended, resting, waiting." Vrel's confident posture did not change, but there was uncertainty in his yellow eyes. "Partner?" he repeated. Yuna smiled. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she truly smiled. But it was not a warm smile. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had walked through darkness and learned to love it. "You issued a warning, Instructor. You said humans are weak. You said we do not belong among warriors. You said we are prey." She pressed 2 fingers against the scar on her arm. "But before you face me, before you learn what humans truly are." The lights in the arena began to flicker. "Face my beast first." Somewhere deep beneath her skin, something that had been sleeping for a very long time opened its eyes. The instructor issued a warning. She smiled and said, "Face my beast first." Part 4. The floor of the arena began to shake. It was not a violent earthquake. It was something different. Something deeper. Like the heartbeat of a giant creature buried beneath the ground. The vibrations moved through the metal and stone, making the stands tremble and the lights swing on their chains. Every sensor in the academy started screaming warnings. Red lights flashed on walls. Alarms echoed through hallways. The defensive systems detected something, a massive energy source appearing from nowhere. Right in the middle of the combat arena, cadets scrambled backward, climbing over each other to get away from the center ring. The Sketh warriors drew their ceremonial blades. The Volari changed color to pale white, showing their fear. Even the stone-like Krath stepped back, their ancient survival instincts telling them that something dangerous was coming. "Instructor." Vrel jumped down from his observation post and landed in the arena. He pulled his blade from its sheath, a weapon that had killed 1,000 enemies across 100 battlefields. His muscles tensed. His scales hardened in response to the threat. He had faced monsters before. He had killed creatures that towered over buildings. He was not afraid, but he was not prepared for what happened next. Yuna stood calmly in the center of the chaos. Her eyes were closed. Her fingers pressed against the scar on her arm. Her lips moved, speaking words in a language that no translation device could understand. Then her shadow began to move. It was wrong. Impossible. Shadows do not move on their own. They follow their source. They obey the laws of light. But Yuna's shadow stretched and twisted like a living thing. It grew darker, deeper. It became a hole in reality, a doorway to somewhere else. Something emerged from that darkness. First came a paw, massive, black as space itself. The claws were each as long as a human arm. They dug into the arena floor and left deep gouges in the metal. Then came another paw, then a leg, then a body. The creature pulled itself out of Yuna's shadow like it was climbing out of water. It rose higher and higher until it stood fully in the light of the arena. It was enormous, 12 feet tall at the shoulder, a shape that the alien observers struggled to understand. Part feline grace, part canine loyalty, part something else entirely that did not belong to any world they knew. Its fur was deep black, so dark that it seemed to absorb the light around it. Along its spine, patterns of blue bioluminescence pulsed slowly, rhythmically, in perfect sync with something. With someone. The creature's eyes opened. They burned with cold blue fire, ancient and intelligent and absolutely terrifying. Those eyes swept across the arena, looking at the gathered aliens like a predator examining a room full of prey. And then it turned to look at Yuna. The small human reached up and placed her hand on the creature's flank. The touch was gentle, familiar, like greeting an old friend after a long time apart. "Hello, Nabi," Yuna whispered. "I am sorry I woke you early." The creature Nabi made a sound. It was not a roar or a growl. It was something softer, a rumble deep in its chest that vibrated through the bones of everyone present. A sound of acknowledgement, of welcome. Then Nabi turned to face Instructor Vrel. The Sketh warrior stood his ground. His blade was raised. His eyes were focused, but his scales had paled to a color that other Sketh would recognize. The color of fear. Nabi took one step toward him. The ground shook. Another step. The air itself seemed to grow colder. A low growl built in the creature's throat. The sound grew louder and louder until it felt like thunder trapped inside the arena. Several cadets in the stands covered their ears. A few fell to their knees. One Volari fainted completely. Yuna spoke again, her voice cutting through the noise. The creatures that invaded Earth could not be killed by normal weapons. Bullets passed through them. Explosives made them stronger. They absorbed energy and grew larger with every attack. She walked forward, and Nabi walked with her. They moved together like two parts of the same being. So our scientists found another way. They took genetic material from dozens of species. They combined it with technology that bent the rules of biology. They created new life creatures that could match the invaders. Creatures that could fight monsters on equal ground. She stopped a few meters from Vrel, but the beasts were too powerful to control. They needed something to anchor them, something to guide them, something to bond with. She pressed her hand against her own chest. Humans. We discovered that our brains, our nervous systems, were uniquely suited to form a bond with these creatures. We could link with them, share our minds, become partners. Instructor Vrel found his voice. This is against consortium law. Biological weapons are forbidden. You cannot. Nabi is not a weapon, Yuna interrupted. Her voice was sharp. She is my partner, my family. We share everything, our pain, our memories, our life force. When she hurts, I hurt. When I'm happy, she feels it too. We have been together for 6 years. She looked up at the massive creature beside her. Nabi lowered her great head, and Yuna pressed her forehead against the beast's muzzle. The bioluminescent patterns on Nabi's spine pulsed brighter for a moment. The consortium granted special permission to the beast handlers after we stopped the breach incursion. Yuna continued. The invasion was spreading. It would have reached other systems, other species. But we stopped it. 47 beast handlers and their partners held the line for 3 years until the portals were closed. Our eyes met Vrel's. I am one of the 12 who survived. The arena was absolutely silent. Every alien stared at the small human female and the massive creature beside her. Their understanding of humanity was breaking apart and reforming into something new. This was not a prey species. This was not a weak race that survived by hiding. This was something else entirely. Yuna stepped forward. Nabi stepped with her, moving like her shadow, which, in a way, she was. You called us soft, Instructor. You called us weak. You said we survived by running from predators. Another step. You were half right. We did survive by adapting. But we did not adapt by running. We adapted by learning, by creating, by becoming whatever we needed to be to survive. Another step. They were close to Vrel now. Nabi's breath washed over him, warm and smelling of something ancient. When the monsters came from the dark, we did not hide. We looked at them. We studied them. And then we said, we can make something worse. Nabi growled, and the sound was like thunder. So here is how this will work, Instructor. You made a deal with me. If I defeated Goran, you would fight me next. But I am offering you a different choice. She gestured to Nabi. You can fight my partner. She has not had a real battle in 2 years. She is hungry for it. If you can survive against her for 1 minute, I will face you myself afterward. Vrel looked at the creature. He was a warrior. He had fought his entire life. He knew how to judge an opponent's strength. Looking at Nabi, he understood something clearly. He would not survive 10 seconds against this beast. Maybe not even 5. Or, Yuna continued, you can admit that humanity earned its place here. Not through hiding, not through weakness, but through becoming the thing that monsters fear. The choice hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. The instructor issued a warning. She smiled and said, face my beast first. Part 5, every eye in the arena was fixed on Instructor Vrel. The greatest warrior the Sketh had ever produced stood face to face with a monster from human nightmares. And everyone waited to see what he would do. For a long moment, nothing happened. Vrel stared at Nabi. Nabi stared back, those eyes of blue fire showing no emotion, only patience. The creature could wait. It had waited inside Yuna for 2 years. It could wait a little longer. Then something changed in Vrel's posture. His muscles relaxed. His blade lowered slowly until the tip touched the ground. And then, with careful, deliberate movement, he sheathed the weapon at his side. Whispers erupted through the crowd. A Sketh putting away their blade before a challenge was over? It was unthinkable. It was surrender. But Vrel did not look defeated. He looked thoughtful. I have fought many enemies, he said, his rough voice echoing in the quiet arena. Creatures twice my size. Warriors from 100 different worlds. I have killed so many that I stopped counting centuries ago. He looked at Nabi with something that might have been respect. But a warrior knows when a battle cannot be won. This is not cowardice. This is wisdom. The Sketh teach that true strength is knowing when to fight and when to stand down. He turned to face the crowd of watching cadets and instructors. I challenged the humans. I said they did not belong among warriors. I called them weak. I called them prey. His yellow eyes moved back to Yuna. I was wrong. The whispers grew louder. A Sketh admitting error? In public, Vrel continued. The Sketh have warrior traditions that stretch back thousands of years. We believed we understood what strength meant. We believed that hard scales and sharp claws and powerful muscles were the measure of a fighter. He looked at Nabi again, at the creature that could kill him before he could blink. We did not understand that true strength sometimes means becoming something new, adapting, changing, creating weapons when your body cannot provide them. Yuna listened without speaking. Beside her, Nabi remained perfectly still, a living mountain of darkness and blue light. Vrel did something then that shocked everyone watching. He bent forward at the waist and tilted his head to the side, exposing his throat. Among the Sketh, this was the highest gesture of respect, showing vulnerability to someone you acknowledged as an equal or superior. "I apologize," he said. "Not because I fear your creature. I apologize because I judged your species without understanding it. That was foolish of me." Yuna was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. "Your apology is accepted, Instructor." She placed her hand on Nabi's side. The great beast made a soft sound, almost like a cat's purr, if cats were the size of small buildings. Then Nabi's form began to shimmer and dissolve. The massive body broke apart in the shadows and blue light that flowed like water toward Yuna. Within seconds, the creature was gone, absorbed back into Yuna's body, returning to sleep in the spaces between her cells. Standing alone in the arena, Yuna looked small again, ordinary, just a young human, woman in simple combat gear, but no one who watched would ever think of her as weak again. Tai Wu sat in the front row with tears streaming down his face. He finally understood. All those years of nightmares, the mysterious scar, the distant looks, his friend had been carrying a war inside her body. She had been through hell and emerged carrying a piece of it with her. The crowd began to move and whisper and process what they had witnessed. Some aliens looked at the humans with new eyes. Others seemed afraid. A few looked angry, as if this revelation had disturbed their view of the universe, but most just looked thoughtful. A month later, the Unified Species Combat Academy was a different place. Instructor Vrel had changed his training methods. He still pushed cadets harder than ever in some ways, but he no longer dismissed any species as weak or worthless. He had requested access to declassified records from Earth's breach war, spending long nights reading about the humans who had fought and died to stop the invasion. "We did not know," he told a gathering of Sketh officers during a conference call. "None of us knew what the humans faced before they joined the consortium. They did not boast about it. They did not demand respect for it. They simply survived and moved forward." He paused, his yellow eyes distant. "Perhaps that is the most frightening thing about them. They do not need to prove their strength. They already know what they are." Yuna became something of a legend at the academy. Cadets from every species approached her with questions about Earth, about the breach war, about the beast handlers. She answered when she could, always calm, always patient. She started teaching an unofficial class on bond, synchronization techniques, the mental disciplines that beast handlers use to communicate with their partners. Several alien cadets attended, even though their species could not form the same bonds. They wanted to learn anyway. "It is not just about the creature," Yuna explained to them. "It is about trust, about opening yourself completely to another being, about becoming something greater together than either of you could be alone." Tai Wu healed from his injuries. He trained harder than ever, but now with support instead of mockery. Other cadets wanted to spar with him, to learn the strange techniques that humans use, techniques developed not for show, but for survival. Garin approached him one day in the training hall. The young Sketh stood awkwardly, his scales shifting colors in a way that indicated embarrassment. "I behaved without honor," Garin said stiffly. "When we fought, I should have stopped when the match was over. I did not. That was wrong." Tai Wu looked at him for a long moment. Then he shrugged. "You hurt me badly. I will not forget that. But I also will not hold on to anger forever. It takes too much energy." He extended his hand, a human gesture of peace. "We can start over, if you want." Garin stared at the hand like it was a foreign object. Then, slowly he reached out and took it. "Humans are strange," he said. "So we have been told," Tai Wu replied. and across the Galactic Consortium, word began to spread about what had happened at the Academy. Stories traveled from ship to ship, station to station, world to world. The tale changed slightly with each telling, as stories always do. But the core remained the same. Humans were not what they seemed. They were small, yes, soft, fragile compared to many species. But inside them lived something else. A capacity for adaptation that went beyond biology. A willingness to face any threat by becoming whatever they needed to be. They had looked into the darkness between stars and found something horrible looking back. And instead of running, instead of hiding, they had said, "We can make something worse." Diplomats from other species began treating human representatives with new caution. Military leaders requested meetings to discuss potential alliances. Scientists sent formal requests to study the bond program. Though Earth politely declined, most of them dawdled and in dark rooms and quiet corners. The powers of the galaxy asked each other a question that would not go away. If the humans made those creatures to fight one enemy, what else might they create if threatened again? What else were they hiding? On the observation deck of the Academy, Una sat alone, watching the stars. Her pendant hung around her neck again, the metal warm against her skin. Deep inside her, Nabi slept peacefully, dreaming whatever dreams such creatures had. They were together. They were whole. And they had reminded the universe of something important. Humans were not prey. Humans were the species that looked at monsters and decided to become one. And they would do it again if they had to. The stars continued to shine, cold and distant, but they no longer seemed quite so dark.